If I could have this show removed from my memory, I'd be thankful. On the bright side, this is probably the worst show I'm talking about. I said that a few videos ago. I thought for sure that Fanboy and Chum Chum was where the bad programming ended. I figured I would just focus on better shows going forward, but that's not what's happening here. We cannot discuss bad cartoons without, of course, one of the pioneers. This is a show that I need to talk about before I can do anything else. Now, what could Nickelodeon have possibly done to warrant this reaction? Somebody approved of that. If you couldn't already tell, the show I'm referring to is Sanjay and Craig. I had this video planned for a while now, but since I've recently hit 5,000 subs, I suppose right now is a good time for its release. A show meant to be about a friendship between a kid and a snake is often remembered for how disgusting it was. But why is that the case? Well, I guess I'm gonna have to revisit this show for myself. So let's go back and look at the unfortunate show known as Sanjay and Craig.
Are you?
And now for our feature presentation.
In 2013, Sanjay and Craig made its debut on Nickelodeon, with the first season premiering on May 25th of that year. Once again, just like the previous shows I talked about, I saw this when it first aired, and for some godforsaken reason, okay, I know the reason, it was because I was a dumb third grader, I was excited for it. It looked very different from what Nickelodeon was putting out at the time, and the general premise sounded interesting. A kid and a talking snake doing cool things with their friends. In a vacuum, the show sounds normal. I wish that's how the show turned out. And to be fair, it kinda did. But it wasn't that simple, as you'll see. Let's look at the first episode to get a grasp on what we're dealing with here. The first episode is titled Brett Venom MD. I saw this when it first aired. This is the episode that introduces us to the main characters, Sanjay Patel, who's your typical hyperactive neighborhood kid, and Craig, a snake who acts like a kid. Everyone seems to be aware of Craig being a snake, so I'm not really sure why he disguised himself. The other two kids, Hector and Megan, are also close friends with the main duo. The first episode is focused on butts. That's an introduction. The boys find out that a butt transplant is happening at the hospital Sanjay's mom works at. Because of the subject matter, they make it their mission to see the operation firsthand. This eventually leads to them posing as doctors and having to blend in, but not just any doctors. They goof around until the actual butt transplant happens, which is where we meet the main antagonist of the show, Mr. Nudeman, a male Karen who hates snakes and is Sanjay and Craig's next door neighbor. This whole transplant surgery is being performed on him, and the next time they see Nudeman has a BBL. That is a sentence I've just said. For the first episode of the series, it's not as bad as episodes that would come afterwards, though if you want to be annoyed, the very next episode has you covered. The episode is titled Laughquake, and it's just Sanjay and Craig annoying everyone, including the audience, with their laughter. This is also the episode where we're introduced to Megan, in the weirdest way possible. Snoop Dogg was in an episode too, I guess. Not really sure where else I would have put that in this video. So for the main introduction, the show doesn't seem too bad. Nothing amazing, has some issues, but perhaps it can improve with time. I said when this aired. Okay, I didn't say that when this aired, as I mentioned earlier, I was stupid enough to enjoy this. If you're looking at the footage shown in this video, you're most likely thinking to yourself, this show looks like Bob's Burgers. That's because some of the artists from that show were involved with this show. Unfortunately, Sanjay and Craig doesn't have as good of writing as Bob's Burgers. The animation is at least decent though, I will give them that. But that stuff aside, what else happens in the show? Well, every episode is different, meaning that the plot can be unpredictable. This does prevent the show from becoming formulaic, so I guess that's a good thing. There are a lot of episodes that focus on different characters as well, but honestly those were pretty boring. If the episodes aren't centered around the main cast, usually there isn't much to write home about. Sometimes I wonder if that's a blessing. There were also a few specials here and there. So now let's get into probably the most infamous part of the show. The humor. When somebody points out a reason for a show being bad, the humor should never be that reason. Can it be the writing? Yes. The animation? Yes. Pacing? Yes. Inconsistent plot? Sure. Lack of continuity? Okay, I can excuse that one to some degree. But the humor, aka what gets the audience to laugh at your show, should never be the low point of your show. Unless that is your kind of humor, then... okay. I'm talking about this lowbrow, gross out, random, crude, hyperactive, change the channel style of humor. Most of you know this today as brain rot, and Sanjay and Craig was one of the pioneers of this crap. There is an episode simply titled Unbarfable, where the main characters spend the entire episode trying to make Hector vomit, only to fail multiple times, and he only ends up vomiting after he sees, you guessed it, his own butt.
Come on now, dawg. Come on, man.
The episode is filled with disgusting visuals with no real punchline or jokes to make them funny. But this is far from the only example of gross out I can think of from this show. Let's just go over some of the prime examples. There's an episode where Sanjay is pregnant with a fart baby. It gets pretty uncomfortable at times. There's an episode where they record everybody farting for a song. This is a fetish, you can't convince me otherwise. There's an episode where Sanjay falls into a human waste pool, and instead of just taking a shower, he decides to live in a sewer. There's an episode where they eat candies that cause bad things to taste good, which leads them to eating full-on diapers. There's a scene in an episode where Craig almost freezes to death, and he's only saved by a bunch of warm, full diapers. And probably the worst episode I've ever seen, titled Rash Thrash, where Sanjay develops an allergic reaction to being around Craig. He gets a rash that manifests into this, the closer Craig gets to him. Sanjay eventually passes out from the rash. This is a visual that I could have gone my entire life without seeing. I remember accidentally seeing this while flipping through the channels on TV one day. I'm very much split on whether or not I want to know what the creative process was for this episode. Either way, no one needed to see this. But this is Nickelodeon we're talking about, meaning that they see perfection in the most deplorable imagery you can think of. So, really, nothing else to say about the humor. Now, before people start spamming this in my comments section, let me just get this out of the way. I know that the writers didn't want the show to be filled with gross-out humor. They actually did want Sanjay and Craig to be more slice of life with more charm. Something that could potentially become one of Nickelodeon's top shows. And looking back at some of the episodes, it definitely seems that way. This is probably the saddest thing about this show. There are definitely some episodes that had really solid ideas and they could have been great, but the visuals and gags ruin them. Unfortunately, this is just a network that survives on only three things: nostalgia cash grabs, bottom of the barrel humor, and SpongeBob. And if you're not one of the three things I just mentioned, you aren't gonna last long on Nickelodeon. Honestly, I feel like Sanjay and Craig would have been better if it got picked up by Cartoon Network. And you know why I'm saying this? Because I want to compare Sanjay and Craig to a very similar show that Cartoon Network began airing the very next year. That show was Clarence. Both of these shows have a very similar premise. They're about kids doing kids things while figuring out the world around them. And yes, Clarence has some pretty gross things happen throughout the show. Mainly just that one episode where he got sick from eating a bunch of deviled eggs. The difference, however, is that Clarence didn't make gross-out humor the focal point of the show. It was rare when those kinds of scenes occurred, and they were mostly focused on the writing and character development. That's why the show was enjoyable to me. I know Clarence also had a very off-putting art style to some, but like I mentioned in another video, I can overlook the art style as long as the show is well written and has likable characters. If Sanjay and Craig had taken a similar approach to Clarence, people would have looked back on this show more fondly. Though for reasons unknown to me, there are still a lot of people out there who like Sanjay and Craig. Most likely nostalgia bias, because you ain't convincing me that this show was good. Anyways, let's move on from this. By 2015, I'd completely checked out of watching this show. The only time I would see it would be when I was channel surfing. Sanjay and Craig would continue to air new episodes until July 19th, 2016. The final episode was a half-hour special titled Booyah for Bollywood, and after that, the show was left in the dust, never to be brought back. In my opinion, Sanjay and Craig was the prime example of Nickelodeon sabotage. It's almost impressive how bad the show ended up becoming. Something that could have been great is remembered for things like this. I'm sure most people know this by now, but I'm gonna repeat this just in case. If you're into animation and you have a dream of eventually creating your own successful cartoon one day, do not go to Nickelodeon. In fact, don't go to any of the big three networks. Your best bet is remaining independent. Once Nickelodeon gets a hold of your creation, it's no longer yours, and they can destroy it as much as they want to. Indie animation is the way to go. That is, if you even get the chance. With the rise of AI, I don't think any of us animators are going to be doing anything in the next few years. But anyways, what were your thoughts on this show? I'm sure the comment section is going to be very divided on this matter, but I stopped caring a while ago. But that pretty much wraps up today's video. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel for future content.